How we got here. Monday afternoon, How We Got Here starts now, and today we talk b-boy dancing.
That's right. Are you much of a b-boyer?
I'm not. Is that a sexist term? Do we need to change that, by the way?
Oh, B-person?
Yeah.
Well, we have b-girls too.
Oh, is there b-girl?
Oh, yeah,
It's a separate term, I see.
It's a thing.
Just making sure.
We're all going to learn something today, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Am I much of a b-boyer? To answer your question, no. I've never even tried before, actually.
Me too. It looks so painful. I cannot. Kate, you're young.
Oh, wow. No, I have
Try
not.
it. Let us know how it is.
Well, Kaylin used to be a hip-hop dancer.
Oh my God, yes.
Right?
I
Oh,
think
really?
was it in college or in high school? She was part of like a group that did dancing, hip-hop dancing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my only connection, I guess,
Right.
to that sport.
Well, it's crazy because, of course, we're anticipating, hopefully, the Summer Olympics actually go off this year. And some really interesting sports are added. Surfing, skateboarding, sports climbing, so which is like rock climbing, right? So all
Okay.
these traditional athletics that the Olympics usually display are not being replaced, but we're adding some more relevant, more current sports to kind of draw a new audience in.
Yeah.
And that's what the IOC, International Olympic Committee, has been trying to do. So they announced recently that 3 years from now, I guess 2024 Paris Winter or Summer Olympics is going to feature b-boying.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
So not for this summer's Olympics
Not yet, no.
when it comes around next time. I like that.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, it's athletic. It's artistic. And there's lots of sports in the Olympics already that are artistic and athletic. So it works.
That's right. It really fits in. It's kind of like a gymnastics floor show, but more of an updated, maybe urban, if you want to label it that way.
Yeah.
But it's really surprising news. So in Paris, in about 3 years' time, we're going to see it. And it's going to be officially called breaking.
Okay.
Oh,
Which is
nice.
great for the originators of this dance form because that's what they prefer to call it as well.
Oh.
Not break dancing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're kind of doing the research.
That's how you know when someone doesn't know what they're talking about, I guess, when they use the term break dancing.
Exactly. So now we know. That's
Yeah.
code for that. We don't know what we're talking
We'll
about.
sound cool now when we talk about breaking.
Yeah, and of course, Korea's b-boy and b-girl teams are among the favorites to bring some kind of medal home from that.
Oh, yeah.
And because we have some experience. In 2018 in Buenos Aires, they had the youth competition, and b-boy and b-girling was an event there. And the Korean b-girl team brought home a bronze medal.
Nice.
So we're getting, some accolades out in the world.
It's been that way for a long time, right?
Yeah. Now, for anybody listening right now, I'm sure the vast majority of us know, or we've seen some footage of b-boy events, people spinning on their heads and whatever. But if you haven't, just imagine young men and women spinning on their heads, doing flips, air scissors, and freezing.
Yeah.
In perfect synchronicity as you listen to this little piece of music, BDNM. Break it down.
How'd you get my ringtone?
Break it down.
All right, so let's go back, I guess, to where b-boying started. You mentioned New York City, yeah?
That's right, the Bronx to be exact. The whole idea of b-boying and breaking kind of came about with dancing and music almost at the same time.
So would this have gone back to, let me think if I can remember from that drama series that I watched, New York City, maybe late 1970s, Grandmaster Flash was DJing at the time, and it was a brand new kind of thing, right? This kind of
It was a brand new sensation.
scratching records and things like that. Going from turntable, yeah, exactly, going from turntable to turntable, and then the dancing came along, right?
Yes. No.
No?
This was like about 8 years before that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, back in like 1971, roughly, there were like a bunch of Puerto Rican and African American kids who, in the inner city, you don't have baseball diamonds and soccer fields, for kids to play in. So they roamed around looking for something to do, and in the Bronx at that time, music was playing out of everybody's households.
Yeah.
It was a very big community affair back then. And so what these kids would do is they would take the music and they would start dancing out on the streets. Then they would start challenging each other to dance to this music. And they're very specific albums. What was it, like James Brown, Marvin Gaye, and a handful of other artists that had specific kind of grooves that they liked.
I was going to ask you what kind of music it was, because hip-hop as we know it today in 1970, 71, 72 wouldn't have even existed, right? Yeah.
That's right. And so what these kids ended up doing was they started taking elements of their culture. So like the Puerto Rican kids would take elements of salsa and dance that they saw their parents doing, and they would incorporate that into their dance routines. And they would lay down stuff like cardboard and so that clothes wouldn't get dirty and they wouldn't hurt themselves. And you could do it anywhere where you heard music or you had a boombox.
So was the dancing kind of, when we think B-boy, we think of breaking. We know how to use that term now.
Yeah.
Popping and locking, Kate.
Pop and lock.
Yeah.
Kate, please show us how to pop and lock.
I don't know.
There you go.
Would it have been that kind of style even back at those times?
Well, it was actually developing. Here's where some of it might have come from. Kung fu movies.
Oh, interesting.
No way.
Yeah, so the rise of this new form of dancing that we call breaking now, it was at the same time the rise of kung fu films in the U.S., particularly Bruce Lee films.
Okay.
So these kids were going to theaters, watching kung fu films, and bringing some of that dance into their, the street dances.
But it kind of makes sense. I never would have guessed.
Isn't that great?
But it kind of makes sense because if you think about, I don't know, just martial arts in general, the chops or the kicks or whatever, they're kind of short, abrupt movements.
Right.
So I can see the connection there between that and the new form of dancing.
And when you actually watch recent b-boy competitions, you can just go onto YouTube and check it out. You can actually see a lot of martial arts influence in the dance. When you see people like the Hapkido guys just jumping, 10 feet in the air to kick a bunch of boards.
Right.
That's almost the same thing that b-boyers do.
Yeah, right.
It's really acrobatic.
Yep, a lot of jumping, a lot of flipping, a lot of and tumbling. I'm not sure there's too much of that, but yeah, you see the elements there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now this kind of dance. This kind of dance competition became so popular in the Bronx that even rival gangs, would settle minor disputes. I'm sure not major disputes, but minor disputes with dance-offs. Gangs.
Wow.
So it's kind of like out of the West Side Story or Footloose or something.
Yeah, right.
But this actually happened.
But now it makes more sense what we see today because the teams, when they, I don't know what the correct terminology is. When the crews break against each other.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm so out of my element here. There's that kind of battle. I mean, it is a battle, but it has that kind of intense, us versus you and we're better than you gang type thing.
Yeah, each crew is antagonizing the other crew
exactly.
that's on the dance floor. So they're kind of like, poking fun at each other while the other's dancing.
Yeah.
So it all came out of that.
Drum lines are kind of like that too, aren't they?
I think so. But my question is like with the gangs, I can't just imagine a bunch of thugs in like one side against the other dancing in turn to the same music and then eventually one team saying like, you know what, you guys win. We lost. We'll back out of this turf. Yeah.
Who were the judges at that time, I wonder?
I have no idea.
The mayor of New York City?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is really kind of the beginning of organized dance competition, in dance. But at that time, I'm sure it was like probably maybe one of the higher ups in the gangs, they probably flipped a coin and said, we're going to agree not to fight. We're just going to dance.
The elders.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the great thing about breaking, the early development of breaking, it's not just the dance part. It needed music, right, in order for it to develop.
Yeah.
And this happened, and this is a cute origin story, at a back-to-school party.
How so?
So there's a DJ, a local DJ Cool Herc, and he was throwing a back-to-school party for his sister in some apartment complex. So he was the kind of DJ, like you mentioned before, they all have two turntables, right? To go from one song to the next very smoothly to keep people dancing. What he noticed is there would be these breakdown parts of songs where it'd just be the drums. And that's when people started doing crazy dances, like really expressive dances. So he had this aha moment and decided he was going to basically focus on those breakdown parts. And I have a bit of audio with the man himself talking about this whole process. So 피디님, let's listen to DJ Kool Herc.
Rhythm. I started out with lean back, dance back, clap your hand, stomp your feet. That part right there, when the break, boom, I had to come in with bongo rock. Bongo rock was still no vocals in it, and I would go into Baby Yui, the Mexican. And it was like, whoa, I think we got some hit, because people was like, oh, whoa, everybody was like, yeah, I'm feeling this, oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. Do you remember that hit? And it was on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I think. It's like dun 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 dun.
That's Apache.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an old 60s surf song.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So these New York City DJs in the early 1970s, and then I'm sure it developed all the way through the 1970s, they were using different music from different cultures and then just finding the spots that were awesome and then patching them together.
Because as we heard in that clip, a lot of those songs had the same sort of groove and percussion parts, right? So he basically, what they were doing is finding the break beat, right? So the break beat is basically where the drums and percussion parts were featured. So the melodic instruments like guitar, bass, vocals take a break and let the beat stand out.
And the beat is where we are focused on when they make the music for the B-boy or
Breaking.
B-girl dancing.
Exactly. And that's
Amazing.
how, yeah, and that coincided with the development of hip hop.
Okay, so we're still stuck in New York City. How did Korea become the best in the world at this?
Well, the thing is, right after about the late 70s, like you were talking about Sugar Hill Gang, hip hop became an international sensation. And we heard a song a second ago, the Hey, You, What You Gonna Do? It's a really cute, early 80s hip hop song. That was the Rocksteady crew,
Okay.
who were a bunch of kids from the Bronx who became internationally famous. So they wrote a song for them to sing and to take on the road internationally. These kids were featured in Flashdance and a bunch of other movies, and they brought breaking or break dancing to the world.
So did they visit Korea, do you know, or it just became known in the international community?
It became known in the international community, and when it got to Korea, it was officially the late 80s, but it didn't stick. Like American Soldiers were playing hip hop and stuff, and they were doing breaking back then, but it didn't stick until about 1997, which is called Year Zero for Korean breaking.
Interesting.
Oh.
Yeah, there was one dude, a Korean American, John J. Chon, who was visiting his family here.
Okay.
He brought a VHS tape of an LA breakdancing competition. And he just kind of brought it with him, and I gave it to a friend. Came back about a year later, found out that tape was dubbed over and over and over and over again. And suddenly there was a scene here.
Yeah, all these crews started popping up.
That's exactly what happened.
So cool.
Yeah. One tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was
Thanks,
just like,
John.
Yeah, exactly.
That
He's-
John. You and that John.
he's kind of a legend, in Korean
guess
hip,
so. Wow, what an interesting story. All right, we'll have to leave it at there for the first hour today. Really interesting. Thanks for that, John.